Yeah, absolutely. So my kind of introduction, my name is Jackson Roberts. I'm a teacher at Joplin High School, so I get to engage every day. I like to joke around. I got a lot of kids.
Too many.
Yes. Oh my
Too
god.
many. What are you in double
Uh,
digits now, huh? You're like in the
it,
30s.
it's unbelievable. Oh, no, it's in the hundreds.
Oh
You gotta learn all the names.
yeah, because they rotate, right?
Yeah.
Every
So
hour.
this year with the pandemic is even harder because usually I have names down by now, but because they're doing A day B day schedules for different classes, it's not like I have 7 hours. It's like I have 14 hours. So I'm trying to learn 14 different class names. It's ridiculous.
That's too good, man.
But um yeah, so I'm a teacher, and I have two daughters. I have a 7-year old and an almost 2-year old. And yeah, and then kind of the whole idea here, I approached Steven, for those of you listening. We go back to high school, and I Steven, you have all your content and all that, and I followed all. I think 9 out of 10 times I ask you fitness questions and stuff like that. But I'm always drawn to your stuff because you also do your vlogs about your family and you do a lot of dad stuff, and I that's part of the reason I love your content so much. And I don't feel like there's enough of that. And kind of what you were talking about earlier about you know just how to asking questions and stuff like that, things that dads do. There's not really a community like that, and that's part of the reason I'm excited. If for no other reason, I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn a lot just talking to someone about
Yeah,
this.
and I think like to your point, like the impotence, the beginning of those communities can be as humble as this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's two people discussing an idea and hoping that other people, jive with what you're putting down and want to be a part of it. Um, and like that's kind of like a decision. Like for all the random stuff I put out onto the interwebs, a lot of it is just I just like enjoy making that stuff. I get a lot of energy from making it. But for a long time, it was very fitness centric and almost solely fitness centric because it was a lot of it was part of marketing strategy to build a brand in that world and bring people in. And then like 2 or 3 years ago, I just came to the realization that like if I'm going to be doing this for a long time, like if I'm going to be making stuff and putting that out to the world for a very long time, it just makes sense to not constrain myself to like that one piece of my world when my world is much bigger than that. And there's lots of important things that I care about, want to talk about and share. And so like, that's why to your point, a lot of my content in the last couple of years is trying to like weave in like fitness, fatherhood, personal finance stuff, maintaining a career, a day job to support the family, just all those different aspects. Because I think in 10, 20, 30 years time, that's going to paint a much more accurate, clear picture of kind of like what my life really was and what my brand, so to speak, or what my reputation is really about. And when you reached out about doing something like this, I was like super excited because this was sort of a this was sort of like a passion project for me. Like I alluded to before we kind of officially started recording this 4 or 5 years ago, trying to start this like my dad life brand, which was basically just this idea of building a brand around what it's like to be a dad and all the different challenges. It was right when we had our first kid, and yeah, so this kind of just struck that chord with me again. But it's fun when you can work on something that isn't a solo thing where you're the only one doing it. So having somebody to also be a part of it and create something like this, I think just excites me a little bit more than trying to go it alone. But I guess to back up there and just kind of introduce myself, I was actually thinking through like your question here about, who are we? And I think for me personally, like I do right now at this stage of life, mostly identify as a husband and as a father, particularly. Those are kind of like top line priority. And then below that would be like coach or trainer for fitness related things. And then probably everything else kind of like follows down somewhere on that list. So I guess like my name's Stevan Freeborn. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm trying to be great at those two things. And that's kind of what that aspect of my world is what we're going to talk about the most on here. Like even to the point where like I told my wife that like it's so much our priority that like I'm okay like punting my career for the next 20 years. Like if I have to, because that's like a thing in our culture where if you're like a working man, but you're also trying to excel at being a father and a husband, there's a stigma around that, right? That like, oh, he may not be totally committed, or he may choose them over us, like more probably in the corporate setting, but it is a thing. But like I told my wife, like I'm totally fine. If I'm 40 years old and like I've spent the last 20 years just pouring into my kids and my family, and I've stayed in the same place career-wise, I'm totally fine with that. Because if I want to decide at 40 to turn it loose on my career, then I'll do that then when my kids go on to start their, next phase of life. So,
And that's a good, from the teacher side of it being, an educator, that's one of the real benefits there is because it's a very hard job and you definitely take your work home with you. Especially this is my first year doing special education, and that's a whole nother monster. Then there's so many other responsibilities and work, and it's been a lot of catch up. But it's nice that I'm kind of on the same schedule as my kids, as far as my oldest, she's in first grade, so pick up the one from daycare, pick up our youngest at daycare, get Hayden, and then during the summers we have that time, and that's kind of our time. It's really
that's killer, man.
My wife, she's a banker. She's going to school right now to become a teacher, and not only because I think she'll kick ass as a teacher, but because that idea of all of us being on that same schedule is kind of ideal. So that's very big for us. Is I stress about teacher salaries are what they are, and I think I have the conversation once a year. Maybe doing something else to make more money or something like that.
And like that's why like a project like this is so important, because those are such real struggles. Like not to discredit the roles are in particular, like my wife stays at home, but your wife provides for your family just like you do. So not to diminish that, but just I think as men, we take on that role. Like I need to provide in that way. And we feel a pressure to do that. But then we also now feel this newfound pressure to like be a present father, not just like provide and then be absent in other aspects of life. So you're balancing these things, and you have to sometimes you do have to make that decision of like, am I going to pour it out a little bit more at the job and make a little bit more and see my kids a little less? And I think what I've learned, at least in the last 5 years working in like a really like corporate setting, was like, I was just going to stick my flag in the ground. Like, this is where I stand on this issue, like family first. Mm-hmm. And I was basically going to let people navigate around that. Like let it be known, like I work hard and I would get a job done if you ask me to do it, but it's not going to come at the sacrifice of my ability to be present and to provide emotionally and spiritually on the home front. Like I'll do a great job for you. And I think like what I learned from that is like, you very quickly then figure out where other people's priorities are and who respects you because of that and who doesn't. And that, to me, that helps then me figure out, okay, what people do I want to have like a deeper, meaningful relationship with that maybe down the road leads to something, and what people I probably don't want to get too invested in because they don't have the same things in mind in terms of values and priorities. And
That is one thing as far as like you find, I find myself anyways gravitating more towards other dads just because that's a common connection we instantly have. I even, even my friends who aren't fathers, a lot of them talk about having kids someday.
yeah,
And
they
so
get it, right? Like
I'm really
they
talking to them about that stuff.
yeah, and it's like I just experienced this like firsthand from making making a move in a job. Like
Mhm.
I went from working with people who basically, some of them had children, but they were much older kids. So like they were out of the little kid, like where you really need to be that present role. And then some of them most of them didn't have kids altogether. Right. So I was like this one lone person that had these two little kids at home, and I'm trying to balance like very intense project work that's customer facing with also wanting to prioritize being at home too, by 5:30, and not show up to work an hour early every day, and just manage my workload so I can be good at work and be good at home. And now I've moved over to a company where like everybody has little kids, like even the people that own the business, like they have small children. So it's just that you feel this camaraderie, like they get it, like they understand what you're up against.
Mhm.
And not only that, they're rooting for you to be successful in that part of your life while being successful at work, right? Like it's just such when you find a group of people who don't believe that you have to compromise one for the other.
Mhm.
And that, I don't know if everyone believes that, but I think there is a older way of doing things where that's kind of the model was like,
Mhm.
if you're a guy, your job's to work, and what you get at home is kind of what you get, and that's that, and
Yeah,
that's not good enough for me.
yeah. It's there is almost kind of like a secret language there. Like you instantly can make connections without knowing
Yeah.
people. Like, oh, I'm a dad too. Oh, you got boys? Yeah, girls. Oh,
Yeah.
and but yeah, there's a lot of those archetypes for the dad goes home and works, and he comes home and he reads his newspaper, and he eats you know for he eats his dinner, and he's the man of the house and all that stuff. And
Yeah, like
yeah,
you hear all those stories of like, I remember one of my personal training clients, she used to tell me about like when she was growing up that like every day after work her dad would come home from like, and this is not to like knock, like because like there are lots of successful ways to run a household and run a
oh
marriage,
yeah,
and the people in that relationship, what they come to an agreement on is totally fine. It's just my vision for fatherhood looks very different than this. So she would tell me about like he would get home like between 5:30 and 6 every day. And so her mom would always like make them get all cleaned up, get ready for bed, get them ushered off into their room so that they were settled and quiet. And she'd have like a drink ready for the dad when he came home, and he would like get the drink and sit down for dinner, and it would be totally quiet so he could like, it's just like because obviously like that was the agreement, was like he went off for the day and
yeah.
hustled and brought home the bacon, and she managed the household, and then his reprieve from the outside world was to come home to a home that was well organized, and all those things.
And,
um
and salient.
yeah, exactly. And like there may still be like marriages out there, but I feel like now at least the generation of women that we're dating and that we are married into has a whole different set of expectations of how the home is supposed to work. And
Absolutely.
so as men, we have to show up in a completely different way, in maybe a way that wasn't modeled to us and that we weren't really coached well on. And that's why we need this collaboration. That's why we need dads being in close proximity to one another, having these conversations about their wins as well as their losses, and sharing the knowledge, standing on each other's shoulders instead of just trying to make all the same mistakes again and again and again on our own, off there, just flying solo.
See, and like what you said before, that that dad who comes home to that environment where it's quiet, he's relaxing. It's not necessarily the wrong model. That's part of the reason I wanted to do this with you so bad. Is I don't necessarily want to put different styles of being a dad down. I kind of want to celebrate all the
Each,
good ones and collaborate. Literally a dad collaboration. This
yeah,
has been something in my head for
totally.
a while,
I love
but
that. And I, like one of the guys
yeah,
I admire a lot is, I admire a lot, kind of like from the interwebs, is Gary Vaynerchuk. And like, he is somebody like I totally respect as a human being, but he's like totally upfront for how his dad life looks. He's like, from like Monday to Friday, I like never see my kids. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm gone working 24/7. And that's the kind of household my wife grew up in. Her dad was just like that. And we are compatible, and I go do that. So then when I come home, I am 100% the happiest, best version of myself for my family. And she's totally okay with being the only cook in that kitchen.
yeah,
And like, that's all, like, that's awesome. You know what I mean? And I guess like that's the key, is like finding what kind of like works for you and what you're happy with, and not, but not just sitting back and taking on the version of fatherhood or dad life that is being perpetuated. Like, same thing moms are up
right,
against. Like, you don't have to be this type of mom. You don't have to be the Pinterest mom. You know what I mean? Like, you don't, or the Instagram mom. Like, it's
yeah,
okay to be a hot mess mom. It's like, it's okay. Like, that's totally fine. Do you, and feel like you have a safe, and that's like dads, like they don't, I think dads don't feel like there's a safe place to turn to and discuss those things. Like, how do I approach my wife about the fact that all I want to do is work during the week and not deal with all the pressures of being there for bedtime? Like,
yeah.
maybe maybe they need other dads to have a conversation with about that, who can talk them through that. Like, how do you navigate those waters?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being that lovable goofball. Just like there's nothing wrong with sometimes being a little bit of a hard ass.
Yeah,
But
totally.
it all depends on I think it really depends on your partner. When you come home, what does your wife expect of you? That's one of the um and I say this with her in the other room. I know she can hear me, but I'd say this anyways though. I feel like you and I have pretty similar expectations for us, because kind of what you were talking about is similar with me and my wife. We have very much a collaboration. It's not just because I pick the kids up and come home, and I cook just because I'm the first one home and I enjoy cooking. And even though when she cooks, it's fantastic. I think she's naturally a lot better than I am. I have to work really hard at it, but that's just kind of our model. But we really focus on, okay, it's not one person being the housewife, so to say.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
this is I was going to talk about this later too, and kind of uh, my dad goals, because that's something that I've kind of shirked a little bit lately. Starting with the special ed job, it's been pointed out to me, justifiably so, that hey, that idea of being a partner is kind of slipping a little bit. We need to step it up a little bit. Uh, but that's the good part of having a good partner, is being able to hear that and understanding that, okay, check the ego and
100%.
see what I can do for the family. That's kind of the attitude with us, and I feel like that's pretty similar with you. Is how's it going to work for all of us, not how is it going to work for one of us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got to be willing to be accountable for that. Like, and I think that's, like, for me, one of the pushbacks I have on fathers of different generations is, I feel like they like shirked a little bit of that accountability. It's almost like they felt like, I get a free pass because I earn a paycheck. And I push back against that. Like, I personally feel like, if I can go to work from 8 to 5 and like sell out and give it out to my job, like 24/7, 100%, all left on the field, there should be no reason when I come home at 5, I can't have that same type of energy, that same level of effort. I should give it out even more
Yeah.
when I come in the door at 5 p.m. And we're never going to be perfect. Like very few days am I perfect where, you know, like my oldest son, he's super into video games right now, just like obsessed with video games. So like the minute I get off at 5 p.m., he's like, "Hey dad, you want to play games?" You know? And like, obviously like I just need like 15 minutes to decompress. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like my innate like feeling as an individual. But then I have to remember, like, he's not been able to hang out with me all day. Right. Like I'm such a big part of his life and I'm the only one that he really wants to play video games with. How can I be frustrated with him or have no time for him or no energy for that? Like I have to bring that to the table. I mean, I'm the one who signed up to bring him into the world and to put him here. Like, so it's on me to, whatever I need to do, find that fifth gear, you know, and show up, you know. It's
Yeah.
even for my wife, you know, she's been in there for 8-9 hours entertaining these kiddos. Like, yeah, like I'm not saying what I wasn't doing was work, but like I signed up for both, you know, and she did too. So just because, oh, I was off doing something else or she was doing the family stuff doesn't mean I get like this free pass to come home and spend an hour just decompressing. You know what I mean? And I've got a great partner. I mean, she's super patient with me. And if she can tell that like I need a minute or I've reached my limit and need to take 15 minutes and step out, then she encourages that. But I do put that onus on myself. Like in terms of goals is I want my kids to see, and I want my wife to see how much a priority they are in my life through how I interact with them and not just from what I say. Like I want them to see like, oh man, he busted at work, but when he comes home, he really busts it. Like he is willing to play. He's willing to interact. He's willing to engage. He's willing to have conversations. He's willing to parent these kids and give them baths and wrangle them into bed and deal with their coming out of their rooms every 15 minutes, you know? And to me, that's like a big thing in my life is like, I want my actions to align with my words. And and that's something like I'm constantly trying to check myself. And I've given, like like you just shared in your example, I've given the kids and Kelsey a lot of like, I want you guys to hold me accountable. You know, like my son, he's really good about holding me accountable with my words. Like when I say fuck or damn or shit, you know, like I cuss like a sailor, but he knows like we're not supposed to say those things. So when I say those things, he will be like, you're not, no, you know? And I don't look at that as being,
giggles.
Yeah, it's like, and like like as a dad, like I think an older generation would be like, you're the kid, you know, do what I say. Like, but like in my world or how I see fatherhood is like, I have to show him what it means to be accountable, like model that. When someone holds you accountable, do you respond with frustration and anger, or do you respond with enthusiasm? Like, thank you for holding me accountable. I shouldn't have said that, you know? And that's such Kelsey and I talk about that a lot, is like so much of what your kids become is really what you are. So it's like one of the best ways you can make sure your kid becomes what you want them to become is for you to work out all your brokenness and all your effed upness and like work through that and try to model to your child what you want to see in them. And 9 times out of 10, I think that's usually the best way, right? Like, cause like my parents were great parents. They're very, very loving, awesome parents. They, you know, but like, I can tell you in our house, there was a lot of, you know, like do as I say, not as I do. Like that was like a very big thing. And like, I don't fault my parents for that, but our actions lend our words power. Like that's just the way we work as humans. And if I'm constantly walking around saying, oh yeah, I'm accountable to my family, but every time my wife tells me like, hey, you know, you're sharping on bedtime here, you know, you're just laying on the couch and you're not helping me. And I get angry, like, and respond with like, I've been working, like that doesn't portray the right thing to my kids. You know, that way when my wife asks my son to pick up his toys, he's going to think like, you know, it's fine. I've been doing all this stuff. I've been busy. I don't have to listen to you. You know, it's just.
I'm certainly not perfect. As I was saying before, that's something I've been struggling with very bad lately is, and not necessarily justifying with, well, I've been working all day, but kind of what you were talking about, like, I think I need to just relax and decompress for a second, and just really falling short on responsibilities. But I do have, you were talking about, I think having a good partner is the big piece there.
That's a huge piece.
You're talking about that accountability factor. Um, and I certainly need to do better at being accountable to myself before she has to say something, because that's certainly not fair to her. But at the same time, she's easily my best, uh, the best person to hold me accountable.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, it's
And
like iron sharpens iron. I mean, we don't
oh yeah,
want to have to. As like I push back on that a lot. Like Kelsey we've had lots of conversations. Like when it comes to money, for example, like I push back on having to hold her accountable on finances a lot, because I'm like, I push back on it because I feel like, you're an adult too, and I shouldn't have to always, be like reminding you about what the budget is. And like, but the problem is that's part of it. Like I guess I push back on that because I feel like it's putting more work on me. But
yeah,
to your point, like that is like, that's what we signed up for, like to be each other's partners. And if I see her going down a road that I don't feel she should be going down, or a road that I think isn't good for either of us, I should be willing to say something and mention something. Like,
yeah,
I shouldn't be resentful for that. Like it's hard because, like, to your point, she doesn't want to do that to me. She doesn't want to put me in that position either.
yeah.
But that's where we find ourselves sometimes, and that's what we signed up for. And I don't know. There's just things that we're just not perfect on, but being able to have the space to talk about it, and not like, I started dating Kelsey when I was 15. And so we've come so far in how we speak to one another and how we deal with like that type of interaction. And,
Yeah.
Like 5-6 years ago, it would have been like a knockdown drag out if I tried to mention something about how our money was spent. And now we've gotten to a place where it's like, totally get it.
Yeah.
We'll tighten it up. And that's relevant to being a dad. And I'm kind of off on a tangent here on marriage and partnerships, but it's so relevant to being a dad because I'm trying to model to like my sons what marriage looks like, what being a husband looks like. I'm trying to pass on that skill set of like, what does good adult communication, what does that look like in an adult relationship? And we don't communicate effectively every time, but it seems like each year we get better and better.
Well, that partnership is so important. And it's one of the reasons I value my wife so much, is because of her ability as a mother and how it affects me as a father. My 7-year-old, we don't have, my wife adopted her. And she doesn't have contact with her biological mother anymore. And it's part of the reason one of the big reasons I do value my wife so much and love her so much is because what I've seen her model to our daughters. And that's something she definitely wasn't getting before. And to me, and that just seeing that makes me want to be better. It's like, okay, she's doing her part, is showing what, a confident, independent wife and mother is supposed to be like. Now I need to demonstrate, what is a loving, compassionate husband or father supposed to look like.
Yeah, it's like it's somewhat not in like a confrontational way, but it challenges you to like, okay, how can I show up at my best, And I think that's
it's like, almost like the analogy of like dueling guitarists.
Yeah.
Like one guitar player plays a solo, and you're like, oh really? And then the next one plays an even better solo, and it's
perfect. It's
compete, but you want to match that person.
Totally.
I've never once been able to match her though.
So much of my one of my big word in terms of like my fatherhood right now is patience. Like pa- patience, because I have a tendency to go from like zero, like I can be like the most like calm, understanding father in the world, and then all of a sudden I've just like reached like I've had enough, and like I've gone off to the net to like the angry dad mode.
Yeah.
And my wife is just like she won't admit it, but she is so much more infinitely patient than I am, and I'm trying to steal some of that because like our kids are in that stage where it's just like, you know, every question has every question requires 30 different answers and 30 different follow-up questions to every one of those 30 answers. And I can never tell my oldest to do something once. I've got to tell him like 10 times. And our youngest can like sort of speak, but it's not totally intelligible. So sometimes I don't understand what he's wanting or don't get him the right thing. And, you know, I spend 15 minutes trying to figure this thing out. And so like, that's like a big goal for me, is like learning patience, you know, and I get frustrated with myself because I'm like, they're toddlers, Steven. Like like you bring so much patience at your job. You need to bring that home to these little human beings that like their brain is not fully developed yet. Right. And that's something like, I feel like as a parent, I always have to constantly remind myself is like, your logic and your reason that you're applying to this situation, they don't understand. They are not a fully formed human being yet. And so you may see like my every, because I moved to this new job and I'm working from home, I've been doing a lot of work out here in the gym. And so when I come out to the gym, my little one's always like, I'm coming too, you know? And then I have to explain to him that I got to get on a phone call and he can't be out here, blah, blah, blah. And it's like World War III has just broken out, right? Like pillows start getting thrown, and it always frustrates me because I'm like, that is so disproportional, right? It's like, it's not that big of a deal. But then I have to like talk myself off that patience ledge, and like, to him, it is a big deal. Like this is his little universe. And it's so exciting, this idea of getting to go with dad on this adventure to the garage. And now he's missing out. And it's just like, I'm constantly checking in on that. Like, they're just toddlers. You need to be forgiving. And that's like one of the things you put on our list of things that we've covered so much already. But one of the things you put on here was, you know, some of the best and the worst dads in history. And the person that I've been modeling or trying to model, and sounds so cheesy, but the person I've been trying to model my fatherhood after so much more has been a heavenly father, and like how that heavenly father treats humanity, and like how forgiving and gracious and patient and understanding and loving of a father he is to me, and how I can try to like in some like sliver of a way live that out for my own kids and be that sort of father, is like, that's like and to go to that, like the challenge of having to balance, okay, do I be a rough and tumble dad who's toughening their kids up, or do I be this like soft and gracious father? And right now, like, I'm totally erring on the side of like tons of grace, tons of love, tons of understanding and patience. Like that, I feel like if I err on that side, like things are going to come out much better on the long end. The challenge is in the execution, obviously.
Yeah, that patience is a learned skill too. And I think that's one that everyone struggles with, especially with really young children. I feel like the older they get, the easier it is, but especially with young children. And that's something that's kind of a nice segue into my good dad pick, you know, for best dads in history. You certainly picked a much better one than I did. It's like, I'm going to model a heavenly father. It's like, I picked a father who doesn't technically exist. So,
Yeah, well, it depends on who you're talking to on mine. You know, people may think that's fictitious as well.
Yeah, fair enough. No, but kind of what you talk. It's a good segue. I put down on my pick for like best dads in history is like Michael Scott from The Office. You know, as a person, very cringeworthy, not a great character.
Dude,
But
he
what's
he he was so like that's like so like my brother and I talk about all the time at how in terms of like his leadership and like in terms of how he cared for people, so underrated. Like
yeah,
so underrated. Like, and I'm sure you're gonna talk to that, so I won't interrupt you, but I totally can see why you pick him. Like, I totally understand. I think I totally understand why.
well, it's part of that, but then also like one thing that sticks with me is one of my favorite moments of his. We love The Office, so we've watched it several times all the way through. I
Yeah,
don't think.
I've probably watched it 30 times from start to finish. Like,
Oh,
yeah, I watch it every night. Like, that's like my go to bed routine is I put on The Office. Like, I play video games usually till way too late at night, and then like everyone's in bed, and I put on The Office, and like I feel at home.
yeah. No, there's this line though in the very last episode, the season finale, where he comes back and it shows Pam talking to him, and Pam just goes, Michael and Holly have so many kids, and he has so many pictures of them that he has two phones with two different plans to keep track of all the pictures. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, that's where I would like to be. That dad who celebrates his kids so much.
Oh,
And you're
that's a great word. That word, celebrate your kid. Like that. That is like one of the things that so like as like a human being, like right now, like I'm talking and I my wife and I we've been trying to do a podcast too, and I always find myself talking on there, and I think, man, the way I talk on these things, like I sound like such a like sometimes I feel like I sound somewhat well adjusted and able to talk like, but at like my core, like my default switch is like this is all dumb and way too like touchy feely, and everyone just needs to grow a pair and like
I'm talking a much better game right now than what I usually operate on.
I'm just like as a human being, like my default, like how I treat myself is like suck it up, Steven, and just deal like so.
My wife just looked at me and started nodding, like,
Yeah,
"Yup."
yeah, that's like totally like. But I'm doing so like I'm trying to work on that so much because I know that's not it's like it's an effective way, but it's probably not the most effective way. And to your point, like like one of the things I've tried to practice, and every time I do it, I'm like, oh my God, Steven, you sound so cheesy. But like I try to tell my kids, like I try to tell them all the time is like, I love you and I'm proud of you. Like I want them to know that like they are so deeply wanted and so deeply like that's a great word, celebrated, and I want that to stick with them. And like right now I'm trying to like demonstrate that not only through my actions but like tell them, like actually tell them that those are things for them. And every time I do it, I'm like, man, you sound so cheesy. But that's part of me trying to celebrate my kids. Like that's such a, and Michael Scott is like such a great, because it's just like pure joy, pure like revelatory in the fact that he has children now, like something he
Yeah.
yearned for so many years.
So that he could have 100 best friends.
Yeah, he said like I tell
Not a bad idea though.
it's so true. I tell my son all the time, I'm like, you're the best friend I never had, you know, like that's because it's like you got like your own little mini me, you know. Like I tell him all the time, like I give him a hard time because as he's gotten older, his face has started to look more like my face. And I'll tell him like, hey man, why'd you take my face? And he's like, it's not your face, it's my face, you know. It's just I don't know, man. Kids do something to you. They break something in you, but it breaks in like a good way. Like it opens you up to a whole thing that you didn't even know was there before. And your parents try to tell you that when you're a kid, like they try to like, but and they always end those explanations with like, you'll understand when you have your own kids. And it's so true. Like you understand once they get here and you have them, you're like, okay, now I get it. I can't put it into words, but now I get what you were talking about.
It kind of goes back to like that secret language of like just by knowing someone is a dad, just like you don't even have to say anything. It'll just be like, okay, we understand each other.
So true. So true, man. Like,
Level.
it's just like it's like the nod, right? It's like you see the dad across the way, and like the kid's either like losing his shit, or the dad's like carrying 60 different pieces of, he's got like a bag in this arm, he's got a kid in the other, and he's pushing the stroller, and you're just like,
Yeah.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you, and but like to that point, like I'm trying to make that like I think about this a lot, like with our money situation, because one of the things that Kelsey and I have decided is like, we're trying to put the next generations of our family on very sound financial footing. And we're trying to take that hit in terms of like, we're going to have a little less now so that one down the road, we can hopefully have more. And then the next generations can have more. And I'm trying to make like this idea like a status symbol. And that's what I'm trying to do with like being a dad too in my mind, is I try to like, okay, being that dad that's like struggling through the hallway, like that's a status symbol. It's something to be proud of. It's something to like, it's something to desire for, in the way people desire for homes or cars or the job or whatever it is. Like, I want to desire to be wanted and needed in that way,
Absolutely. That's how I feel. You talk about, use that word, modeling that behavior. That's kind of the way I feel. You having sons is kind of on a different level, but I love the idea of like modeling to my daughters. Like when I come home, it's kind of hectic whenever we come home, because I usually start trying to cook right away, and we're trying to get homework done, and we try to clean up a little bit at some point. And but at the same time, I want to try my best to still keep it light and, still be that loving guy with them. And it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
There's some days I'm just completely fried, and the toddler has been crying for 20 minutes for no reason, like she did today, and I have no idea
For the love of God.
Yeah. It was one of those, like, I offered her a cracker. She didn't want the cracker, so I put it up, and then she begged for the cracker. And then I tried to give it to her. She put her head on the ground, like, why, God?
Oh my
God. And so those days, the patience is tough, and that's something kind of what you were talking about earlier that I've struggled with is, being that patient dad and all that stuff. But that's really kind of an ideal I want to strive towards. Is almost I picture the dad that at the end of the day, he did all of his work, took care of stuff at the house, played with his kids, and collapsed exhausted.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, like that makes me think of like just like exactly what you said. It makes me think of this. Brene Brown talks about this quote a lot, but a lot of people know this quote because it's famous. Because I think, if I remember right, Theodore Roosevelt said it, but basically it goes something like, basically, great is the man who strived and failed, right? Like he lays exhausted and spent, right? And like that is the achievement. And then layered on top of that is like, I'm totally fine with striving and failing like that, because at least like I'm on the field. Like I'm on the field, I am engaged in this game, and I am playing it. And sometimes I completely fuck it up, and sometimes I like go all the way and I score, right? But that's why like I'm trying to that's why it's so important to me to interact with other dads who are also doing that, because I'm not really interested in people who are looking at my life and critiquing me who are on the field. Like if you're not in this game with me, I'm really not that open to your feedback. You know what I mean? Like I really don't care. Like, and that whole, like, I just got to relate to you on the coming home situation. Cause like every day, now it's like I literally walk 6 feet in the door, but before it was like driving home. Like I literally open the door and it's just like utter chaos. Like not that my wife hasn't like kept them like, like taken care of, but just they're so excited that you're there, right? Like it's just like, I've got the little ones like got no pants on running through the house. the big one's just he's got the Xbox controller and he's just like, you want to play games? You want to play games now? Let's play games, you know? And of course, like, I want to eat dinner, you know, or like I want to kiss my wife, you know? And the minute you try to like make a move that isn't aligned with what either of them wants you to be doing, it's just like, oh man, major meltdown city, you know? And then, but it's like one of the things, and there are like so many days where I'm like, you know, like I just have like this like big, like, oh my gosh, here we go again. And then there are days where like they will go to my mom's and they'll be gone all day. And like, I'll come home and they're not here. And I'm just like so empty. Cause I'm like, this is this is such a letdown. Like there's no activity. There's nothing going on. This is what I want. This is not what I wanted, you know? Yeah. And it reminds me of how, you know, I'm not someone who loves chaos, but it reminds me of how like chaos in some ways is like an indicator of how full my life is, you know, how much good things I have going on, you know, like that's like being able to do a podcast with you and having a full-time job and having all these kids that I want to take care of and this wife I want to have a great relationship with. It can feel like chaos and overwhelm, but it's also like, it's like, wow, how like people want to do things with me and they want to be a part of my life and they're in my life. And it's just, you always have a choice, right? Like you have a choice of how you want to look at those things. Is it, you want to look at them as stress and overwhelm and chaos, or do you want to look at the glass being half full and, you know, how filled up you are by all these people and how many opportunities you have to do all these things and try to be successful. Like, even if you aren't successful, like even if you're like me and you freak out because your kid is yelling at you to do something on a video game and you're like, I'm trying, leave me alone, you know? And it's just, I don't know. It's definitely like, I will forever call it like the greatest adventure. It will be the greatest adventure of my life, will be the next 18, 20 years of navigating all this and trying to get them wherever they're going to go as adults and get them there safely and healthy and in one piece, you know?
I couldn't agree more. I use that word chaos, and anyone who's raised small children is like, yes, that's exactly what it is.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
I almost want to characterize it almost more of like it's a grind, though, and that's what you try to do. A grind is hard. It's really hard.
So hard. It's so
hard.
It's
not necessarily a bad thing. That's being a dad and being a parent in general. Being a dad is tough. It's really tough. It's without being big man. It's a man's job.
People don't talk about it enough. Parenting is a high performance thing. Like,
it is.
If you want to be, you want to really excel at being a parent, you have to like, you're not an athlete in the sense of what an athlete is, but like, you need to get your sleep. You need to take care of your body. You need to you need to restore your mind. You need to get yourself emotionally healthy so that you can be the person you need to be for your kids. Like, you can't half-ass this thing. It's not going to go well for you or them if you're running on fumes every day and you know what I mean? It's just,
and that's a big reason I started looking at your content more, was because, about 2 years ago, I started wanting to get healthier because, I was about 270 pounds and I was just coming home from work completely spent, falling asleep on the couch, no energy, didn't want to like go do anything after I was done with work. Let's go to the park. And in my mind, I just like, I really do not want to go outside. I'm so tired. I'm so mentally exhausted. And, I think back to, I had great parents. It's kind of what you were talking about earlier. I had great parents as well. And I couldn't have asked for better parents. I had a great dad. The one thing is, on the communication level, I always felt like growing up, there were some times where, and part of it was I was definitely wanted to be the center of attention all the time. And many people will tell you that hasn't changed. But I definitely at times felt like I didn't have, that recognition or, that buy-in almost. And so that's something I just kind of, it clicked. I was like, I feel like I'm kind of doing the same thing. And I just started being like, okay, I need to figure out how to be healthier in my body, and that'll help me out emotionally, and I can do the things I want to do when I come home. And that's when I really started looking at your stuff and trying to exercise. You know, I've lost about 30 pounds. I still have a ways to go, but that's that part of being a dad. You know, kind of one of the things we talked about is, or we have on the list, is like best dad advice you've ever heard. And it wasn't, and I did hear it from my dad where he said, and I'm pretty sure he stole this from Modern Family because I think I heard it from them too. But it works. Is the most important part of being a dad is showing up.
Oh, yeah.
And after that, it's a lot of fun.
Totally agree.
I felt like because where I was physically and the way it was affecting me emotionally at the time, I wasn't really. I was there, but I really wasn't, 100% there. You know, I didn't have that fifth gear to kick into.
Yeah, that's like, those are actually that would be the exact words like I say to myself in my head is like, how am I showing up for Kelsey today? How am I showing up for Cal today? How am I showing up for Cal? And like, there are days when like I don't get up early enough, or I didn't do that thing before bed that I should have taken care of so that it was off my plate before they were up the next day, or whatever those things are, where I'll say to myself,
it affects everyone else.
It does. It's like, yeah, that wasn't a good way to show up today, but that's a piece of parenting that is like largely not discussed, is like so much of what so much of anything you are a part of in life, the outcome of it is dependent on what you bring to it. And if you bring a lot of fucked upness and brokenness to something, the outcome's probably going to be kind of fucked up and broken too. And I think that's why the onus on, like I've got like this whiteboard over here, and I just write stuff on it all the time that like connects with me. And one of the things that really connects with me is like, your brokenness is not necessarily your fault, but it is your responsibility to address. Like it is your responsibility to dig in and figure out, why can't you show up for your kids that way? Why can't you communicate with your spouse that way? Why can't you express your emotions? Why can't you talk through those things without getting upset? Why, when your partner says that thing, does it trigger you? That to me, like the onus is on you to figure those things out and to work through those things so that you can show up the way, in my worldview, the way like God would intend you to show up in your life. And nobody talks to you about those things. It's like, to be an effective parent, you should probably square away, your eating. You should probably square away your a daily physical movement or daily physical practice. You should probably read some. You should probably write some. Maybe you need therapy. All these things that like, or like for me, one of my biggest things for me is I know like I'll be a better husband and father if I get some solid alone time every day. Like I need some solid 45 minutes, an hour to myself. Like I know that I'm very introverted. I know that like that's how I get energy restored back to me from having that introspective time to be alone. Like, and it could be being alone at the end of the day, watching Netflix, watching The Office, right? But that 1 hour of solitude can equal the next 24 hours of success at whatever it is I'm doing. It can make me a more patient father. It can make me a more understanding spouse. It can make me more attentive at work. It's just, and those are the things like trying to pick apart, what are those things for you? Like, what are those linchpins that, like I know like my brother-in-law, he told me the other day, like he knows that like he's a horrible human being if he does not sleep 7 or 8 hours. So like sometimes I'll get him to stay up and try to play video games, and I'll be like, hey, you can go to bed late, it'll be fine. You still make it to work on time. And he, he's just drawn that line where he's like, look, dude, if I don't go to bed now, tomorrow's going to be a shit show, and like, I totally, like, I really respect that. Like Kelsey knows that when it comes to like exercise for me, she's like, you need to go work out. Like that's going to make you a better human being. It's very important to you. It's very important to your mental well-being. make time for it, and we'll make time for it for you. Like, we know how important it is. And for Kelsey, like for her as a parent, she's very extroverted. She needs human interaction. Like, and as much as maybe she doesn't sometimes want to admit that, because it probably does make everyone feel a little vulnerable to admit they need stuff. She needs to speak with her friends. She needs to connect with people other than me, other than our kids. And she's just a different human being when she does. Like, she just has all the energy in the world, and she can go for days and hours if she has that human interaction. And I would encourage, like, if anyone ever listens to this, I think that's like, you gotta
know what fuel is.
Yeah,
you gotta know what fuels you, and you gotta know what's mud. It's a Joe Rogan phrase I love, where he says certain people are fuel and certain people are mud.
Oh yeah,
and totally. I feel like, oh yeah,
totally.
But knowing, and just being honest about it, kind of what you said with your brother-in-law, he's acknowledging, hey, if I don't get this, it's going to be hell tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's not a weakness. It's not a knock against you that you need something, like, as a human being, that you need something to be your best, right? Like,
and we have to. I think it, as dads especially, but also just as people, we have to say it without ego and without competing with each other. It can't just be like, well, I'm certainly guilty of this too. It was like, well, I woke up at 4:30 and ran a 5K the other day and hurt. And we have to, that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to do this so bad, is, encourage people to talk about, I fucked up today, and I, yelled at my kid, which I hate. But also just being honest about it. And that's one thing that I've tried to do at times, is whenever I do screw up, or whenever I'm not at my full standard, is just being honest about it. I've had times where I've had, our 7-year-old in the car, and she's just been talking. And it's kind of what you said earlier. She hasn't seen me all day. She's telling me about school. She's excited to see me. But my brain's about to explode. And I just tell her, I'm like, sweetie, we have like 3 minutes till we're home. I just need like 3 minutes of quiet time. And then when we get home, let's talk about this.
Dude,
most of the time she understands, but it's being honest about it, or being honest about, I've had times where I've, taken shit out on her whenever we've gotten home and I've had a short fuse. And then I've tried to just be like, hey, I shouldn't have gotten upset like that. I'm having a tough day, and just being a little vulnerable, but also just trying to be honest. Being like, that wasn't me at my best right there.
Dude, that's huge. Like, that's like,
my 7-year-old's awesome, because she's like, well, you're still a good dad.
Yeah, I know. And like, like, to me, that's so powerful. That's so powerful, because like, how many adults can't do that? Like, they're like walking through this world, and they fuck up, and they cannot look someone dead in the eye and say, without some like ridiculous preamble of what you did to make them act some way.
And I certainly don't do that all the time. I've had many times where I do not explain myself.
Well, no, but I totally, but like, people can't, like, there's so many adults that just can't, man, I'm really sorry. I should not have gone off like that. There's no excuse. Like, I messed up. I really want you to know how badly I feel about it. And I'm going to really try to work hard on that. Like, that literally brings like convulsions to so many adults. And I think that's largely because, like, nobody modeled that to them. Like, no one modeled that's
using the word again, that modeling.
Yeah. It's like, one of the proudest moments I had as a father to date is like my son doing that. Like, my son coming out of his room after yelling at his mom and being like, Mom, I'm sorry, I got upset, like vocalizing the emotion he felt, apologizing for the action he took, and seeking reconciliation. Right. And like, I knew, like, that may sound selfish, but I knew that, like, that him doing that was because he saw me and my wife model that to him. When we mess up with him, we say, hey, Cal, we should not talk to you like that. You're just a little kid. You're trying to figure these things out. We're the adults. We need to have like making sure like he sees what that looks like to seek forgiveness, and then also see what it looks like to give forgiveness. And now at like 4 years old, he understands what that looks like. And so many people don't get that in their life. They don't have people in their life who do that for them. And it's kind of sad to think of that. But from like a parenting standpoint, it's very empowering, because you think, man, what impact could that have 20 years, 30 years from now? Like when my son wrongs somebody and he's able to apologize to them, and reconcile with them. Or if someone wrongs him, and instead of him holding a grudge or being bitter, he can give them forgiveness, and that's like, it's one of those things as parents, like if you could leave a legacy, right? Like that's something I think you would hope to leave, like regardless of what they do for their work or career or impact they have on the world. If you could leave a little piece of that in somebody, and that carries on to them and 10 other people they interact with.
That spreads out to so many people.
It does. It's like, and that just like me and Kelsey always, when we talk about this stuff, we always end up with the arrow pointing back at us. Is like, we're always pointing it back at us. Is like, what do I need to fix about myself? What do I need to do better for me? And what can I control more of so that I can show Cal these things and do these things for him. So he doesn't have to struggle with those same things that maybe I've struggled with in my relationships or my, adulthood or, growing up. And I have to give props to my parents. Like I remember like one of the biggest things, I was in high school, but one of the biggest things my parents did for me was they encouraged me to I had to work and pay for my car and stuff. And that conflicted with baseball. And I remember talking to my parents about it, and my parents they were like, hey, we totally understand the conflict, and we get where you're at. And like, there was definitely a part of me that was like, I want them to go talk to the coach. Like, I want them to go talk to Harriman and explain the situation, because I don't want to have this conversation. And they pushed me to do that myself. Like, they're like, we're not getting in the middle of it. You know what our expectations are. You know what your coach's expectations are. And, you can go have that conversation, explain your situation, try to find a compromise, a middle ground. And like, as like parents, like that's you just don't I don't think as parents, maybe we realize in the moments how significant those things are that we do for our kids like that, where we can model things for them, coach them through them, and then help them actually like execute on that stuff themselves and really gain that skill. And young kids are like cool, because like these toddlers that we're dealing with, they're like, they just like, everything is like boom, 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 boom. But like, you don't have to, it's not like an adult that you've got to like beat something into their head 30,000 times. They just like, you do it once or twice, and you teach it to them, you talk to them about it, and you live it. And like, they will soak it up,
Well, and that's like, our almost 2-year-old, got a few weeks left. But she's really started to be more vocal and speaking more clearly and answering questions. And one thing is, I try to be, and this really kind of full circle. You're talking about this back to my parents. My parents are very big on manners and being polite to everyone. And so, even when we go like to the grocery store or anything like that, if I'm talking to a worker there, it's yes sir, no ma'am, thank you, and always thank you very much. And our 2-year-old has started, anytime I say thank you, she'll pop up and be like, thank you very much. And it's so cute, but it also just warms my heart, because I'm like, I wasn't even trying to teach her that. She just saw that.
Yeah.
And every time she says it, people are like, oh. But as much of a monster as she is, she's also cute as hell.
Yeah,
so,
it's awesome. Like, it's just, yeah. It's probably one of the best feelings when they do stuff like that. Like when it's just, I don't know, like and it's so subtle, things like that. Like you said, it's like saying thank you back to somebody, or my youngest, like when someone falls, or if I'm like, ouch, you know, I stub my toe or something, he'd be like, are you okay? You know, like demonstrating like some form of empathy or concern for another human being. Like that's huge. Like,
Yeah.
you know, talk about like the basis for having empathy, like the basis for trying to uh, experience what other people are experiencing, you know, having perspective or thought or concern for the way other people are experiencing the world. And what an important skill set that is in the time we're living in today, where, you know, it seems like people, they can't see more than 6 inches in front of their own face.
Zero empathy.
No empathy. Yeah. No empathy whatsoever. Even if they do disagree with somebody, or have had completely different life experiences, like, it's being able to like, wait a minute, what if I was in that person's shoes? Like, what if I did have those same life experiences? How would my worldview look? Right. Like, and
Is it possible that someone has had different experiences than I have?
yeah, exactly. Totally. 100%. Yeah. Kid, like, like this, that makes me think of like kids, like what they do to you is like everybody I interact with now, I think of as like, that's somebody's baby. Like that, everybody I approach, like the most angry person I approach now, I think, man, like, I'm like,
What did
I
that
guess,
person do to that baby?
yeah, I'm like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, that guy wasn't born wanting to be angry. That guy wasn't born wanting to be, you know, deranged or upset or whatever that person is. Like, I'm like, that person started off like as this sweet, innocent, like most cherished gift to somebody into the world. And either the world or some people in the world like took that person and broke them and messed them up and put all this bad stuff in them and then spit them back out. Like, you know, like, and you can, as like a parent, you get to see that firsthand. You watch your kids and you're like, there's nothing like evil about this thing. Like, they're like, this is totally this blank, innocent slate. And the world is what, you know, evil people or evil world or a broken world and broken people is what breaks others. And that colors your worldview so much differently. Like, it makes you a much more empathetic person, much more understanding, much more forgiving.
And I think whenever you have that, even if you don't do a great job of modeling for your kids, even if you know you have that subconscious, you know that you're modeling, I think even acknowledging it makes all the difference. It's kind of like the, you know, scientific method, you know, first step is defining the problem. If even if you know on some level, okay, they're watching what I do right now, it's going to influence the way you behave. Even if you're not doing a great job, it's going to do something to
Totally. Yeah. It's going to modify in a positive way. It has to. I mean, you know.
Well, that's kind of a nice segue. We're wrapping up.
All right, let's to wrap it up, let's do like a speed round here. So we got we'll have to circle back on the you know, how is dadding changed in the pandemic world. That's a good one.
Yeah.
We'll circle back on that one. But let's run through some of these like hot seat ones. So let's say best advice we've ever heard about being dads. I think you already shared yours, but restate it.
Yeah, so that was my dad just told me the most important part of being a dad is just showing up, and after that, it's a lot of fun.
That's great. I think if I had to go to, I don't know if I've heard a great piece of advice, but what I always think of, like in my own journey in fatherhood and dad, is like there's a movie called Parenthood, and there's a scene in there where the grandma is talking about her husband taking her on this roller coaster ride. And I see so much of myself in Steve Martin in that movie, because he's like this dad that's very like straight laced, and there's a plan and a routine, and we need to do these things. And like his son is like not doing any of it. Like he's just like, it's just like this chaos of roller coaster. And in that scene, the grandma talks about how like, you could go on the roller coaster or you could go on the merry-go-round. And the merry-go-round, the routine is like great. Like it's okay, but it only does the one thing. You know, it's like, yeah, like versus a roller coaster is all this excitement.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, I always try to remember that is like life with kids is always so much better than life without kids. Like it's just,
Oh yeah.
it's like on a whole nother plane. Um, okay. Let's go through top three. If you don't have top three, like no big deal, but top three best moments from the last week of being a dad or kid moments, things like that.
Yeah. So I have three. One of them isn't even mine. It was something I saw. But my number one, uh, our oldest Hayden, we were going into Walmart, and I can't even remember what we were talking about or what the conversation was, but she said that she just stopped and she just goes, "You give me the courage to do anything."
That's awesome.
I was like,
Talk about filling you up, right? Like,
"Let's go get ice cream. You won. You said all the right words there, kid. I love you." But that, you have to be made of stone not to have that touch you in some way. That just
that's awesome, man.
kind of vilified a lot of things. So, the other one, the one that wasn't even mine, was just driving down our road, and I saw a dad with his little girl on a bike, and I'm a sucker for those Norman Rockwell, sentimental moments where I was like, good. There should be more. Good. He's helping his kid on the bike. That's the classic
awesome, man.
archetype.
Yeah.
Just appreciating that. And then my other one I had, so Cora is our youngest one. She'll be 2 here in a couple weeks. And I found myself lately trying to appreciate all the hard moments, but also the moments I know we're not going to get back again. We've definitely hit the brakes for a while on having any more kids. We have 2 great ones. We don't want to jinx it.
Totally. Don't roll the dice again, man. It's like it's gonna come up big guys.
I was a third, and I understand what that's like. So, but
yeah, like I have a theory. I tell everybody this theory. I have a theory about parents and kids. So if you have 1 kid, you're like totally sane, right? 2 kids, you're rocking the boat a little bit. 3 kids, you're certifiable. You just, we lock you up, we throw away the key. You got more than 3, we just ship you off. Like, it's just like, get out of here. We don't even, we don't even recognize you.
Absolutely. But, so, it's like she has a routine now where, like, if she wakes up in the night, I don't even have to go hold her now. Because all she wants, like, I grab my pillow and literally just lay down next to her crib. And just me just being there, she's deep breath, lays back down. I wait a couple minutes, and then I try to get up like a ninja. And I'm trying to more and more, there's times where I wake up and I'm like, good God, is this kid really up again? I'm trying more and more to remember this isn't going to happen very much anymore.
Oh, that's great, man.
So
perspective, right? Perspective. That's so.
Or like or like the other day, like she was up enough where I did have to like get up and rock her again. I was like, okay, I'm probably in the single digits now of being able to do this, like in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah. So I like all the time I tell Kelsey, I'm like, I tell her all the time, like, I didn't hold the kids enough when they were little. Like you mourn those moments that like you feel like you did your best to make the most of them. Even that wasn't enough, right? Like it just
absolutely. Well, what do you got for your dad?
All right, so let's see, top 3 of the last week. Okay, so it'd been like Friday, Thursday, or something. We were outside. We were outside playing, and Kyler, our youngest, he like doesn't wear clothes anymore, which is like it's become totally normal. We've been in the process of potty training him, and now he's like he loves the feeling of being free, I guess. But I know, but he was outside in his in his little.
Smarter than the rest of us are.
He was outside in his boxer briefs, and we were running around in the driveway, and there was like this little plastic. He laid down on the ground, and there was like this little plastic bat. and he picked it up and he totally just like went straight to bench press position and just started like doing reps. And I was like, that's my bro.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have to
Awesome.
coach him. He just like, I do it and he does it. It's totally normal. Makes total sense to him.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like those are the moments I relish in, because it's like the modeling thing works, right? It's like it's confirmation of you demonstrate the behaviors that you want to see from your kids, and 9 times out of 10 they just kind of they live them out.
I had a moment like that with Hayden where we had one of our nephews was over at our house, and and we talked a little bit about I love MMA and jujitsu and stuff like that, and I talked to her about that because she did a little jujitsu too, and they were wrestling, and then out of nowhere she jumps on his back and steps on the naked choke, and this kid who's also 7, his face starts going red, and he just has this terrified look like he's about to die, and I'm just like, inside I'm like, put your hooks in and flatten them out, but on the outside I was like, don't do that, don't strangle him, he's
That's
dying.
awesome, dude. That's like the best, especially the fact that she's a girl. Like, it's like on a whole nother level. She's like, I just don't give a shit. Like, I'm gonna tap.
He's like, I thought we were playing. I'm like, yes, but you were going to murder him.
Let's see.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. Second to the bench pressing, the unsolicited bench pressing. So I mentioned like our oldest, he's really obsessed with video games, which is totally cool with me. But we were playing, and he's done this before, but it happened last week, so I'll just make note of it. We were playing this game. It's like a physics-based puzzle solver game, and like we kept trying to do this thing and we couldn't do it. And he was like, oh, no worries, we'll just keep practicing, and we'll eventually get it. And I was like, that's like, that's the growth mindset. Like, that's the mindset that will carry him to like the moon. Like, as long as he believes that like with enough practice he can get it, and he believes other people with enough practice can get it, like the sky's the limit. And I don't really know if that's something that, I know that that's probably something that Kelsey and I have said before, and it's something that we try not to ever have any kind of defeatist mindset, but to hear him put it in really simple, very simple toddler speak, was really cool. In third one, humble brag, for myself would have been probably, so like bedtime is like just this fiasco thing for our family. It's fun, but it's just a fiasco every night. It's something. And I had like, we had several tough bedtime nights in a row where it was like, can I have a drink of water? I heard a noise. I got to go pee. Like, it's like 45 minutes after bedtime. Right. And the like third or fourth night into this string of bad bedtimes, he came out and like deep inside me, I just wanted to rage, right? Like, you need to like just go back in your room, shut the door, and go to sleep, And for whatever reason, though, I had like one of those moments where it's like that gap, right? Like in meditation, they talk about it where it's like there's a gap between like you experiencing something and you having a reaction, and in that gap, minding that gap is where you have your power. Is like being able to hold that space and figure out what the appropriate reaction here is instead of just reacting. And for whatever reason, I found that gap in that moment, right? And instead of responding with like that impatience and that anger, I was able to like think just the same words you kind of said to yourself, which is like, this little one doing this bedtime thing it's going to be a thing of the past before we know it. He's not going to want me to come and cuddle for the third time. Yeah. Right. And so I was just like, buddy, I don't even know what his request was, but I was just like, I'll happily oblige by your request. Like, I'm not going to sink into the lesser being of myself, and just enjoy like the fact that I have a kid. I have a healthy, happy, joyful child who wants to be up and wants to be with his mom and dad and interact with them.
I see you post that all the time, and I love that. Just I have a healthy family, and we have a roof over our heads, and we are that makes us wealthy.
We are wealthy. Yeah, totally, man.
I always love it. I see you post that all the time.
Yeah, like that's like I try to tell, like I try to, and like that's more like more than anything. That's like for my own like mind, right? Like that's like Tom Bilyeu talks about how like you need things that signal to yourself your own beliefs, your own values. It's like that's why you should wear clothing that represents who you are. You should put posters on your wall that represent what you believe in, and they are triggers back to you to remind yourself. And like that's part of it, right? Like that's having that script to repeat to yourself of, you know, if someone says, you know, how you doing, right? Like you have that script that's like, man, I'm good. I'm healthy. My family's healthy. Like we're good. Like everything else is icing on the cake. The house could burn down. We're good, because that's going to keep, like that communicates and reinforces to yourself that that's your belief, right? And that like the more you repeat that, the more you ingrain it, the more it just becomes like that default status of where you operate from. But yeah, that's perspective, man. I think this was a good first episode, dude. I could go on and on about this stuff, so this is good. This is great.
That's the thing. I was really worried. I was like, man, we might blow through this really quickly.
No, this is good, man. And it's. I mean, I think as many times as our conversation, like we kept saying, you know, it ties back in, it circles back together. I think that's important, because it tells me that, you know, there's a common through line here. You know, there's certain values and motifs and priorities that are gonna bubble to the surface. I think people are gonna connect with that, and there's gonna be other dudes and other dads that that want to be a part. You know, so
you know, in the future, you know, if anybody wants to, you know, if you have questions or anything like that, you know, I please
spit where's the best place of we'll figure out the logistics of how we're gonna publish this or where we're gonna put it at. I can work through the logistics of that. But like if people are listening to this, they wanna find you, they want to DM you, you know, all your thousands of fans, right? Like they're gonna be coming at you. Just like that, you know, dads who want to connect, you know, dads who want to be who may want to be a part of this the dad pod community. You know, put out a handle. Where would you want to direct them to?
Pod community. No, you want to get a hold of me if you have questions or have emails that you want me and Steven to talk about. The email is all lowercase Jaxon Roberts, JaxonRoberts at gus.pittstate.edu. I still got the college email.
Represent, bro. Represent, right? Yeah. Gorillas for life, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So if and I'll direct people if you guys are listening to this. Like I said, I'm not expecting us to have raving fans, but if you are a dad who's maybe listening and you're like, hey, I'm picking up what these guys are laying down, you know, shoot me a DM. Instagram's probably the best place. So my handle for that is just steven.freeborn. If you go there, from there, you can go down all the different links and rabbit holes to find where else my stuff lives on the interwebs. And then we'll figure out for this, we'll put together a website and some social and get this thing posted. We'll probably get it up on all the different platforms and sites. This is the first episode, so we'll roll out more. We'll get our shit put together here over the first few weeks. But I think for a pilot, for starters, I think this is good. Kind of put our flag in the sand. This is what we're going to talk about and go from there.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see if we hear from other dads. That's my favorite part, is I'm going to learn a lot from this. So
yeah, man. I'll get this wrapped up. It may not be tonight. I don't know what I got to do some stuff for work tonight, but I'll get it edited and put together and then figure out where I'm going to post it. And then from there, we can share it out into our personal channels to start with. And I think that's probably a great place to start. Try to get some of these other dads that are kind of in our immediate circle and get them connected.
All
right, man. Yeah, dude, good chat. I will awesome. We'll pencil it in for next week again, and we'll go from there.
All
right, dude.
Good night, sir.
See you, man.
All right.
Bye.